Hello and welcome to episode 78 of Just Keep Writing.
A podcast for writers.
By writers.
To keep you writing.
I'm Marshall.
I'm Nick.
I'm Brent.
And I'm Will.
Gentlemen, we're back again. And after our last two military-focused episodes, we are here to talk about Rejections. Now, before we get into it, though, I want to say the impetus of this episode is from our Patreon, one of our newer Patreon subscribers. And they were very curious about how we deal with rejections, how we keep writing. Essentially, the question is, how do you just keep writing if you keep getting rejections? So that's going to be the framework of our episode today. And I know we've all collected, I got a binder somewhere. I know we've all collected rejections here and there. So that's the framework for today. So let's get into it. What do we got? Who wants to start? What are we doing? Let's go.
Oh boy. Oh boy. Let me tell you a little something about being rejected.
Well, the beautiful thing, like Marsha was saying, this was a Patreon inspired thing. So hop on our Patreon if you want to ask us things to talk about. So now okay.
No, but our Patreon is exciting. You get writing prompts. You're right, Brent. I didn't say this. We get writing prompts every day. You get the episodes a day or two early as well. And it's just and you get access to the Discord, although we kind of let anybody in the Discord, but the conversation's a little bit different, a little more personal, and we do appreciate the emails that come through the Patreon, the Patreon feed. And so thanks to everybody who is a patron. And it gives us a little bit of money to help us pay for some stuff. We don't have to worry about it. So thanks to everybody who does that. And let's go.
Okay, so rejections.
This is the best conversation ever already.
So the thing about rejections, I guess I'll just put it out there because I think sometimes writers try and run away from the fact that it sucks. Like, they suck. Rejections suck. It's okay to feel bad about getting a rejection. It does not mean you lack resilience or you lack willpower or you lack, the stamina to be in the industry if rejections hurt your feelings. Like, rejections suck. Like, they aren't fun. And I don't know if this will make anyone feel any better, but I have been on both sides of the equation. It sucks just as much sending them. So trust me, unless the editor's just an asshole, like, we take no pleasure in sending rejections either. Like, I dread them every time I have to send them. I avoid it sometimes. Like, oh man, I gotta send these out. Like, I don't want to. Like, so it sucks on both sides of the equation.
I have a question. Since we did have a conversation off mic a little bit about rejection before we got in here, but I'm curious, is there not a difference, but a different feeling or a different process? And this is kind of aimed at Brent, as far as short story rejections or like query letter rejections. So like think about it. Like, Nick and I on the show have talked about, NYC Midnight, right? Like, that's a contest, it's not really a rejection, but you lose. Or you send a short story out to a online like Fiyah or something and you get rejected. Or you send a query letter and you get rejected. Does any of it matter? Is it all just rejection?
I mean, yes and yes. Yes, it's different, and yes, it all is rejection. But I would say with short stories, you're more so just putting out the content and you're being rejected based on that. Whereas with I feel like with novel queries, you're having to distill a lot of information into a short space before they even get to your material sometimes. Like, sometimes you'll just be rejected on the query letter. Like, some agencies only want the query letter at first, and they'll make a determination if they want to see more or not. So you're kind of having to go through a few more steps in a novel query to get to that possible, acceptance with an agent Versus like with a short story, it's like you're not having a query with the short story. You just typically you're not. You're just sending it out, and they're judging it on the content of that short story.
Yeah. Will, you were gonna say something?
Just as a slush reader for Escape Pod,
Ooh.
I think what I've really learned is, to Brent's point, no one wants to say no. I think it would be a much more satisfying if we literally had to like love every single story. And as a slush reader, I would really love that, because I'm not the final person who makes it. You know, it goes from the slush reader to the assist. So we are in Escape Pod the associate editors. Then there's the assistant editors. The assistant editors reach it, and then it goes to the editors. Now, for anyone who's listening, the percentages, only about 15 to 18% of what the associate editors read actually makes it up to the assistant editor. So if you even just get that far, that is really good. And what we try to do as associate editors, and I have to say, I primarily work with Ben, who's the assistant editor. Ben really listens to our feedback. He'll do a read through, and some of the comments that we put in, he includes in the feedback. And I want to tell a story about this one that we had to reject. I'm not going to tell you what it's about or who the author was, because one, I don't know who the author was, because it's all blind, all the names blinded when we read them, the associate editors. This was such a great story, and it had the best voice. It captured a like middle school to young adult voice really, really strong. I blasted through a 6,000 word piece. And another thing is that when you're reading the slush, like, you really learn when you need to have the inciting incident. So usually, this is an example. If you have someone who has 15 pages, right, double space pages that they send to you, and by page 7, if the inciting incident is there, if the setting isn't there, if we still don't know what the stakes are, it's an automatic going to be no, you know. But with this story, I read it through the whole thing, and it bordered more on magic versus really truly sci-fi. And I loved this story. And I even put in the rejection. I was like, there is every ounce of me wants to say yes, but it doesn't fit our magazine, right? And I think that's a really important thing to remember. Make sure that when you're submitting, you are submitting with what the content equals for that magazine, or for like a podcast. I would also say,
wait, on that note though,
yeah.
I want to clarify, the person that asked us this said that they did their homework on that aspect. So, but I appreciate that you said that, because that's a huge deal. You got to make sure you do the research on the magazine you're submitting to. But so this person is facing rejection.
Yeah, but this is what I'm leading into.
Yes, please.
So even leading into that, though, that you've done your research and you've submitted it, my next question would be, what story of theirs did you read that you analyzed it, re-engineered it, reverse engineered it, and looked at your story? Right? So, and let me just say this, like, I'm using this as an example. I'm having my writing group reread Six of Crows. Well, I'm rereading it for like the 15th time, because I'm writing a heist book that is science fiction versus fantasy. What I really wanted to do is dive into how Lee did the multiple POVs and what were the beats for the actual heist, and then also how she was balancing external turmoil versus internal turmoil, and also like writing down those beats page-wise, right? How many pages since then? And if you've listened to our other podcasts about mastering plot twists, I got the idea from that. It's the same thing with the short story, in my opinion, and everyone can jump in. I think if you're getting those rejections, try to reverse engineer about some of the stories from that magazine that you liked and see if it's that, if you know, if there are ways that you could tweak it or that you could have done it better. And my next question would be, are you getting personal feedback from the editors? Because I know with Escape Pod, we really try to, especially if it was almost a maybe, or like with that one that I just had to flat out say no, we really try to give like little 1 line, 2 lines about feedback. Like you were almost there. We really loved it. It just doesn't fit it. Thoughts, everyone?
Well, I agree with all of that. And what I would add to it, this is the part that sucks to hear for any writer, but there's just going to be some things that are completely out of your control. Luck is a huge factor in this industry in every aspect, and sometimes luck just doesn't pan out for you. I'll give an example. So when I was doing Breathe Fire with Tor, we only could select so many stories. We literally had an abundance of really, really good stories, and we had to pare it down to 10. And between me and Devon, we had like 30 to 40 stories that we were like, these are all solid ass stories. We got people really stepped up and, gave us their best, but ultimately we still had to choose 10. So we're down to like 12, 15. No, not even 12. I think it's like 11. We have 1 slot left. There's 2 stories. Both of them are speculative stories about social media. Both were killer stories, but we ultimately had to choose one over the other in order to make sure, because this is the other thing about a magazine, is that they have to make sure that content's not repetitive. So we had to ultimately choose one over the other. In any other world, if one hadn't submitted, that person would have been in there. And like that's just a shitty part of the business, is that, there's budgets, there's numbers, there's, thematic issues you have to consider on the editorial side. And none of that literally has zero to do with your writing ability. Like, it has nothing to do with your story. Your story was perfectly fine. You just got crunched up by the numbers. And that's a part of writing you gotta accept. And it sucks, it's shitty, but it's part of the industry. And I'm saying that because I know you pointed out, Marshall, that the listener said that they did their homework. Sometimes you can do your homework. It's this Captain Picard quote: "You can do everything right and still lose," and that's just something you have to digest as a submitting author.
So I have a question for the group, and probably I'm going to, even Brent, I would say first. In that conversation with our Patreon member,
I'm trying to find their name now because I feel bad we're not naming them.
We didn't ask if we could use their names, so
yeah,
we
that's
might
true.
not.
We probably
So that's why I have their name written down, but I didn't want to be like, hey, Bob. That's not their name. I think what I've seen just from my personal experience and like getting this awesome education being a slush reader, because it really has been really like eye-opening and wonderful. My critiques with my writing group have been a lot more blunt in the best possible way. Because when they're submitting a short story to you, I automatically now tell them, I was like, if I was reading this through slush, I would have passed it over, and this is why. So my question is, Brent, when do you think a writing group who are all really talented writers, when is it that you actually need to search out someone who has editing experience on maybe a semi-prozine or like a semi there? Do you think that really gives it a different perspective than just being in your writing group, even if everyone some of them are published, from there. Do you think that's something they should seek out?
So in a perfect world, these editors would have the time to respond and, give you that advice. But there's just so many writers and so few editors by the numbers. I think it would be hard to establish that kind of relationship where you could just reach out to an editor at a magazine and be like, hey, can I, get advice or assistance from you? I know that's something, that was one of the things when forming Fiyah, like we were insisting upon was like everyone gets feedback, because we understood like how it can feel a bit disconcerting, like when you're getting rejected over and over again and you're not getting an answer as to why. And I think to your point, Will, like writing groups sometimes, if you're not careful, they can become echo chambers that aren't necessarily giving you what you need to grow. So I think seeking out editors, it would be hard. Well, I think the better, well, not better necessarily, but an answer that might be more feasible is to seek out writers that are better than you, because they've probably gotten some of that personal feedback. They've probably taken a few more lumps than you have. And there's a few more of those than there are editors, and they can give you that wisdom. I know I've had people, reach out to me into my DMs, ask me stuff, and, I've responded, try to give my advice. And not everybody's going to be available to do that. And so just know that going into it. So don't take it personal if someone can't respond or doesn't get back to you right away. Just understand, like, a lot of these writers are like super busy. And some of them, they're shy. I know it may not seem like it. Like you see this larger than life writer who's like publishing all these stories left and right, but they're painfully socially awkward. And like, so it's just remember when seeking out the advice of others who have a little more experience that they're still human and they come with those traits. So seek to grow, but don't necessarily expect that person to give you that time. And there will be people that will. I mean, if anybody listening, you want to hit me up in my DMs about something, you can.
So I think this is a good time. I'm going to switch over to, should we tell some personal experience with rejection? It just came to me right now. I was looking at Nick and I'm like, I know you've experienced this. I've experienced it. So like, I don't know. I'll just throw it out to you guys. Whatever you want to talk about, it's fine. But like, it looked like Nick wanted to say something. So maybe I'm just prompting you a little bit.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good idea. Let Nick, let's all talk about it. But Nick, you can go first.
Yeah. What you got, buddy?
Y'all got nothing. It's great hearing someone who's an associate editor and an editor like talk about their experience of giving those rejections out. Like that's something I don't feel like we get a lot on. That's really out there. So it's nice to hear that. So, Will, Brent, thank you. I appreciate that. And you guys opening up about your experiences with it. Because you're not always the evil side that says no, and you hate me, and you hate everything I do, and you want me to die, and sometimes that's how rejections feel.
And that's why I'm glad we're doing this, because I totally get it. But honestly, I want to say yes. Like that is my, like, I want to be wowed by a story. Like I love when I can come across a story by an author I haven't read before and just be like, wow. Like I could actually tell y'all some stories about like successful slush stories or whatever that came out. So Danny Lore, I pulled them out of the slush for Fiyah issue 3. And now they have this huge comic career. Like they're doing all these things. So, and they tell me all the time, like getting pulled out of the slush like that gave them the confidence to really, really start believing in their writing. Or Christopher Caldwell, like he's so fucking cool. Like I got him for Fiyah issue 2, and like it's just this rising star. So we want stories like that. Like that's what we're going into the slush hoping to find. Like we're hoping to find these people that haven't had a chance to have their voice heard and then like put them out there. At least good editors are. Good editors are looking for that. Now, how real should I keep it?
Well,
Yeah,
can I throw something out there real quick? Because I
yeah,
think
for sure.
I think that what a lot of us look at when we look at like the online magazines and stuff too, and I think this goes to what Will was saying with Escape Pod too, is like it looks like if we have a story to be told and there's hope in our eyes and we've worked on this story, like it feels like, if I submit it to this and I've done my research, like I could get this short story published. Like, let's just go with that, right? I'm
Yeah,
so amped. I get the short story published. But then when that rejection ultimately comes back, I think the question from our patron is like, how do we push through that, right? And I love the fact that you're saying like, you know, these folks that don't, they made it through that is what
yeah,
I'm saying, is that you're just, you know what I mean?
yeah, yeah.
So I'm partially asking for personal experience and also asking for advice for our audience too, right? Will?
Yeah, I love Will. Yeah,
Well, if anyone has been listening to the podcast, I've always been like, I'm not good enough. I don't know what I'm doing yet.
Yeah,
And
I know, right?
I just submitted something. And this is what I had to learn. Because a lot of times I think, I'm just going to speak from my experience, okay? When you grow up and you hear these voices, or you hear people tell you that you're nothing, that you have no value, and when you're someone who's marginalized, right? And I still have a lot of privilege, right? In comparison to a lot of people. But that really sat with me for a really long time. And also, there was a point in my when I was 23 that I actually got scammed. And Nick is the only person who knows this story into writing for a fake agent. And it crushed me.
Oh,
that
And
sucks.
it crushed me because I was so there there wasn't as many resources as there are now, like the internet. I wasn't going to any cons because, I grew up in a really in a lot of way very isolated when it came to going after your dreams. And I was not yet allowing myself to make room for creativity when it came to writing, because a lot of that was wrapped up into how I felt. Do I have value? And I talked about this a couple episodes about having value, right? So for me, it was just more about, you just got to do it. Rip the band-aid off, submit. And it's okay you get rejected, because that is a part of the game, And I had to really think to myself, and I really needed to have like a moment with myself, and I had to look at it like, after everything I've been through in my whole life, am I really, this is what I'm going to give up on? Like, really? Like, if you think about some of the obstacles I've been through, like this, I'm not going to pursue it because I feel like I don't have something to say, when honestly, when I think about it, I have a lot to fucking say. So no, just get over it. Do it. You're going to get rejected. It's okay. Keep writing. Just keep writing. Brent.
Just keep writing. Okay, so if you're looking for something more practical and less motivational, I will give this. This is a rule of thumb that P. Jelly Clark gave me years ago when I was a baby writer trying to figure out the world, and I didn't know what the hell to do with anything with these magazines. And he was always really great about pushing like me and my peers to like just keep submitting. And so his rule of thumb was, and I still kind of hold to it, is that you don't touch that story until you get 5 form rejections. Once you get 5 form rejections, then you look back at it and see like what you may want to tweak. But until you reach that quota of 5, you keep submitting that story to markets to get accepted. Because he was like, the worst thing you could do is get mired in trying to fix the story after every single rejection. And I think he that rule really helped me kind of understand that, yeah, a lot of it just isn't you. It's just a numbers game.
Yeah.
And so he was always like 5. If you get a personal, if you have like 1 personal rejection and 4 form, that's still not the 5. You got to send it someplace else. So until you hit that 5 mark, you keep submitting.
Oh, I
and
like
I've
that.
kind of always held to that.
Nick?
No, that's super good. I was actually going to talk about that. Like, a lot of it is a numbers game, right? You submit and submit and submit and submit. Maybe you get some formed response back. Maybe you get some personalized response back. But I think it is a numbers game because you really don't know at the end of the day, like Brent, what you were saying, it may not be a good fit at that time, or you may not be the right voice for that specific publishing, right? So it kind of is a numbers game, which I haven't figured out yet. I'm still rocking 0 for like, I don't know, 20. It's great. But kind of bring it back around to like what Marshall said, talking about our own experiences. I feel like I'm pretty resilient to rejection, and I feel like I'm abnormal in that space where like a rejection doesn't hit me right away, but like a year from then, I'll be like, oh, hey, I really do suck, and they proved it. Yeah, I shouldn't do this anymore, right? And so up front, like I think getting rejected does suck, but you got to have a like kind of a point of resilience. I think one of the pieces that I'm good at is understanding that after I submit, once I hit submit, it's now business. So it's nothing to do with the emotion that went into my story. And like if you can look at it that way, I think it does help out a little bit there. And then you go back to your business because you have this emotional thing that you need to write out in the form of story. That's never going to go away no matter how many times you've been rejected or accepted. Will?
Sorry, I don't mean to I feel like I'm dominating the conversation.
Oh.
We're used to it.
We're a podcast of 4. It's your turn to talk. Go.
I keep thinking about this because I'm besides writing, I'm working on getting art samples together to do stuff for Marvel and to send stuff to some of the art directors so I can, do that as far as illustration and do comic books and everything. And one of my professors at school said something, you are going to get rejected, and the idea is if you can take those moments about maybe looking at like what you're pitching for, and this might not always work with writing, but if you're an artist of any form, look at who also they're accepting. If you're a visual artist, right? This is what I'm learning about pitching for like Marvel and DC and everything. See, where you're going to get your groove. And I think this is what's so great about Fiyah. Which one is it, Brent? Is it Fire or
either
Fiyah?
or? We accept as long as it's not Fiyah.
Yeah.
Thanks, George Martin.
Yeah, right. Because a lot of times people who were traditionally left out of having a voice are, you want to look, if you can look for especially those opportunities that are looking for those types of writings or illustrations or by artists of that work, go for it. Because to Brent's point, they're going to be more open of giving you feedback, of maybe what was not working. So I would also try to say, like we were talking about this in my writing group, one of my writing group members got rejected and they were really upset, but then said, you know what? I looked at what I wrote and I really needed to say to myself, I rushed it. So sometimes if you're being rejected too, after those 5 times, just to Brent's point, you can really look apart and be like, okay, like, is there anywhere that I could tweak it? Or if not, you just put it aside and keep writing.
Right.
Yeah. And I think that, from my personal rejection journey, I've liked, the stories that I've written. Sometimes I've submitted it and I didn't do my homework 100%. That's a big part of it for me. The other part is that I suck at endings. I have work to be done. It's the feedback that helps. Like I know when I've submitted to Fiyah a few times, and that is really helpful to have that publication that will take the time to give that feedback, because when I do decide to go back to that story, because I haven't gone back to some of them, because I'm like, all right, it got rejected. I don't want to deal with it right now. I'm going to move on to something else. But I still love that story. So at some point, if I want to go back to it, I still have that feedback to be like, oh, shit, that was where I was when I wrote this. Now I have this feedback. Now I can recraft this story and maybe send it out again and collect 5 more rejections and see what happens. You know what I mean? Like, I like that number of 5, Brent. I really like that, because I've submitted a story to like 2 places, for example. But, after the first rejection, I'm like, well, let me change this and let me change this. Let me change this. Then I sent it to the next one. And I'm spinning my wheels over that one story. I really like that concept of just keep sending it out, because it could be luck. It could be circumstance. It could be, a mechanical thing. It could be a number of different things. But like, once you get that personalized feedback from even one or those 5 5 rejections, like, okay, now I'm going to maybe send it out to your writing group and deal with it there or something like that. Like, I really like that. I think that's a good rule of thumb for sure.
Well,
so
shout out to P. Gilly Clark for that. He's the one that gave me it. But I think it's good because if you're submitting to 5 places, let's just say each place takes like a month to get back to you. That's 5 months away from the story by the time you come back to it. You're going to come back to it with completely fresh eyes, and you're going to really be able to see what's not working. So that's the other part of it that I think is what makes it good, because it's good for getting you in the mindset of like resilience, but it's also good because it forces you to create space before you go back and tinker with the story.
Yeah.
And I also think, if you're getting rejections, that means you're a working writer. Like, you are actively pursuing your goals and your dreams, and you're doing the work that is needed to be done. And a lot of people don't even ever get there in their life. So It means that you're on the right path. You're doing the work. You're putting it in. And what I would also say is, what I always try to do is I try to look for people in the media of any field who maybe have similar circumstances or who beat the odds, right? Or people who inspire you, right? Like, so when I was a kid, it was like, probably like Anne Rice, right? Like, I mean, like really little, because I started reading Anne Rice in 4th grade. My mom had no idea what she was writing. So The Claiming of Sleeping Beauty, my mom was like, oh, it's a fairy tale. No. What I loved about Anne Rice is that, she got rejected for Interview with the Vampire 122 times, right?
Crazy.
People just passed over her. And then it went on to, do so well. So I always kept that in mind because, I loved that story as a kid. My tastes have changed. But I think, it gave me something to really think about. Another thing is I started looking at people who were musical artists or who were painters or comic book. I looked at a lot of comic book writers who broke in way earlier, or people who, weren't like Chris Claremont. Chris Claremont was like a gay man in the 80s writing X-Men, and he got a lot of pushback about a lot of the things he wanted to do. And I felt like, how did he go about unraveling all of that? So you try to make people, I think, who inspire you or who traveled the same road and were able to, break out in their art. I think that's a good way to be like, stay motivated and look towards the future, because your story will be even better when you break out.
Yeah. And I mean, it's the thing with writing is like, it is Alexander Rowland, they talk about this. They talk about having a cockroach mentality. And basically by that, what they mean is nothing kills a cockroach. Like they survive, they can survive a nuclear holocaust. So when it comes to your determination as a writer, you got to be like a cockroach. You got to keep going. Nothing's going to kill that drive. Nothing's going to stop you from just putting words to paper. And what I would say too, just on like a sort of practical suggestion, is that as you're waiting for those 5 rejections to pile up, you should already be working on the next thing. Like that is the easiest way for me personally to dim the anxiety of waiting for an acceptance or a rejection, is to be working on the next thing. Because by the time I get the rejection, I'm like, well, my mind's mostly on this new thing anyway. So that sucks, but I'm on the new thing right now. That's where most of my mental energy is going. So I that's a personal thing. Now that may not work for everybody, but for me, I always find that if I have stuff out there on submission, I want to be working on the next thing. And yeah, that so far has been a successful method for me. Did we want to talk about novel rejections?
Yeah, I think we should probably get to that.
Okay.
To round out the episode, I think let's talk about the query process, rejection agent process a little bit, because I think that's a bit different than, obviously a lot different than the short story to online magazines rejections. So
well, I have a catastrophic novel rejection story. So I guess first maybe we should go through the steps just for people who don't know, and then I'll go back to my horror story. So with the novel, let's just say you just did Nano. Actually, don't do this. Okay, so I'm going to put this out there now. If you just finished your Nano project, please do not query that thing this month or next month. Actually, you want to wait till about maybe February or March before you try to query it. And that's pushing it, because wow, you must have did some fast ass editing. But let's just say you are one of those people that can knock it out. Just don't send it this month or next month. You're really, again, no advice is universal, but I just would strongly caution against doing it, just because this is a time frame where a lot of people who don't really understand the industry will finish something at the end of Nano and they just start sending it out there, and a lot of these agents' inbox get flooded. So that's just a little preface there. Okay, so let's just say this is like regular time, not end of the year. You just finished a novel. You send out to your beta readers. They loved it. You polished it up. You got the edits going. Blah blah blah. So first thing you want to do is you're going to want to get your query letter together. Now, this is how I did it when I was querying. I have a spreadsheet. I keep a spreadsheet of the agent's name, the agency, and like what their requirements are, because you want, just like with short stories, follow the guidelines. The easiest way to get rejected is by not following guidelines. So I set that up, and then query letter, you get and then you send out your query with whatever other required materials the agency has. So at that point, short stories, well, no, never mind. Short stories is a much shorter window in terms of getting an acceptance or a rejection than with novels. With novels, if you're sending it out there, be prepared to wait for a while to get answers sometimes. Every situation is different, but typically you're looking at about 3 months to 6 months, depending on, the agency. Sometimes longer. There's definitely stories with that. So at that point, you'll either get a form rejection, or they'll hit you up asking you for more pages, or they want the full MS. So my first foray into querying a novel was actually a sort of non-traditional way. So I did DivPit on Twitter. DivPit is diversity pitch event for people who don't know. And so I pitched my project on Twitter. And for that day, because they have a different day for young adult and adult, so I did the adult day. For that day, like, my tweet was like one of the most liked tweets. I had editors quote tweeting it, talking about, oh yeah, this is definitely going to get you an agent. And all these people who wanted to send it to me, I have no agent. That tells you how that went. That was a complete crash and burn. All I got was rejection after rejection after rejection. I think that project got like, it got about, I want to say 50 something before I was like, okay, this obviously wasn't ready yet. But yeah, it kind of sucked. It was a little bit embarrassing. At least if now that I'm older, I don't really care as much. But back then, it was like, oh man, like everybody was expecting this. That's what I felt like. I felt like everybody was expecting this to like blow up and do really good. And then once it got out in the query trenches, completely bombed. So yeah, that was my first like real like. I think those rejections hurt the most, if any other rejections, just because I feel like everybody had these expectations set up for it, and it just didn't live up to it when it actually got out there. So if you're going out there, you're querying a novel, I would say be kind to yourself and also be working on the next thing, much like with short stories. Do not sit around putting all your eggs in that one basket, because the difference with novels versus short stories is like, God, you may have to query like 7-10 books sometimes before you even get that first agent. Every experience is different, but I feel like with novels, even more so than short stories, you really have to have a commitment to just keep doing the work and to not take any of this personally. Because I think the numbers for agents are even worse than the numbers for like short story submission editors.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah.
Nick?
And let's not forget, after you have completed a short story, a novel, anything, take time to celebrate. Celebrate yourself. Celebrate your victory. Enjoy that moment of being complete. I think that's kind of like I fail there. I don't always celebrate the way that I should when I do finish something front to back with the final draft on it. I know of 3 times it's happened in the last 6 months with school. So I think that helps out a lot too, is if you're able to take that in stride instead of being done and then submitting it right away, and you're just going from one stress to another. Take that break, celebrate your victories.
Yeah. Or even make victories out of the rejections. I know some people who will do things like, oh, once I get the 50 rejections, I'm gonna go get that pie that I've really been eyeing in the store and I've been trying not to get. Well, I got 50 rejections, I'm gonna go get the pie. All right, it's like once I get the 75 rejections, I can go buy myself that pair of sneakers. Like, because to Will's earlier point, like rejections mean you're a working writer. So build celebration into that. Like you get to a certain amount, go do something nice for yourself. And what I would say too is, if spite is your thing, then use spite. Some people don't want to use celebration. Some people rather be angry to propel themselves forward. If that's what it takes for you to stay in the game and to keep doing your thing, then be spiteful too, damn it. Just do whatever works for you to not give up.
Yeah, whatever keeps you writing, right?
Yes, whatever keeps you writing. And see, this is a statistic I think most people, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but it was shocking when I found it out. I think it is some upwards of 60% of writers never write another book after their first deal is done. So,
God damn.
Even getting into the gate doesn't necessarily mean, because I think sometimes we get this idea, and I know I've had this idea in my head before too. I've had to kind of disavow myself a bit. Is that like, once you get the agent, once the book comes out, your success is just solidified and you don't have any more hurdles. And it's like, you will always have hurdles. There will always be another way to be rejected. There will always be another way for someone to tell you no. And yeah, and also to Will's point earlier, where he kind of talked about how people look at the people's careers that you really like and look at the things they've had to been through to motivate yourself. I think of V.E. Schwab a lot with that. Like their first trilogy completely tanked, completely tanked to the point where it's like you can't even find it anywhere. It went out of print. And look at them now. They have a Netflix show coming out next year. The freaking Ad LaRue has sold so many millions of copies. Like, it's really a matter of how long do you want to keep at this, and how many times are you willing to be told no? And this is the other thing too, because I think sometimes we shame people into sticking this out forever and ever, no matter what. If there comes a point when you really decide like this just isn't for me, and I can't handle the amount of rejections and the amount like of scrutiny I have to go through, then that is okay and that is valid. And if you got to back away from it, back away from it. Just make sure you really, really giving it the thought it deserves before you make that kind of a decision. But I do think sometimes, this is just me personally, I think sometimes we overemphasize the keep doing this no matter what forever and ever. And sometimes dreams change. So if you feel like this just isn't for you at some point, then that's okay too.
This is for another episode, but thinking of that also is I'd really like us to do an episode on actually why we write. Because for some people, I feel like it is just to your point, like you're trying to get published, you're trying to tell stories, but like, is writing also, can it be viewed as like a calling? Meaning that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get published and you're going to make money, but the actual point of writing, it was something we did for SNL a couple weeks ago, and one of and the Apple commercial, I was working on an Apple commercial for World's AIDS Day, and one of the bass players is a bass player for Beyonce, right? And we were just talking about music and like how like I play instruments and everything, and she said the most wonderful thing. She goes, people should play instruments just to play. There shouldn't be this focus of just, well, if you're taking instruments as a kid or an adult, that means you have to do it as a career. No, like you literally could just do it for fun and because you like it.
Yeah. Just go play. And I think sometimes I saw someone say this and it kind of resonated with me, was like, just because you're good at a thing doesn't mean you got to make a career out of it, or you have to monetize it. Like, if you could be an amazing singer, and that doesn't mean you have to go try to pursue to be a recording artist. You just like to sing, and like that's okay. So I think if you're really, really struggling with the rejections in this industry and it's really bogging you down, I think it wouldn't hurt to have that conversation with yourself. Like, because I know me, if someone was to come to me right now and be like, I can 100% guarantee you that you will never see a dime off of your writing starting now, I'm still going to write, So that may not be the same for everybody. And that's okay too, because like the thing is, just because we're moving that impossible scenario out the way, just because I like to write doesn't mean I don't like to eat too. So like, it's okay also to like want to write and make money. So
right.
Yeah. But I feel like I'm losing the point here a little bit.
That's I have a question then, because I think about creativity transference. If you sometimes take a break from one creative activity, another creative activity is going to come to rise. I think sometimes we need to, hopefully people can change their energy. And creative means everyone thinks it's, well, I can't draw or I can't do this. It's not about doing that. It's about having a point of doing something, right? Woodworking, building a little doghouse is creative because you're literally putting intention and thought into making something. That could be crocheting. It could be so many different things to kind of take your mind off of your main creativity force, whether it be writing. So if you're a writer and you're like, I'm not creative in other ways. If you bake, that's creative. Organization, guess what? That's creative because that's something I just can't do. So I think we need to also think in terms of, there's so many different ways that we can grab our creativity and give it a rest on like the one main thing that we want to pursue.
Yeah,
Sure.
I think that to build on Will's point with that too, I think there's some I've seen people say, and I think it really, really is true. If once you start writing with the intent of trying to get published, you need to find another hobby like that is not monetized in any way. Because if you're writing was your hobby and you're trying to let it also occupy the space of being your career, you're gonna drive yourself just batshit. So find another hobby. It doesn't necessarily have to be a creative hobby. Some people like they like to run or they like, I mean me, I like the gym. Like that's like my other thing. Like just have something else that you're passionate about that has nothing to do with writing, because that's another way to build up that barrier for when you do get rejected for stories. Because if writing is your whole world, those rejections are going to hit so much harder. So do the things that you need to create that space. And I think I said this. Me and Nino were talking about this the other last week. One of the biggest things that has helped my mental with writing this year, in particular, in terms of like handling the challenges of it, including rejections, is having friends who don't give a shit about me being a writer and honestly don't care about me being a writer.
Yeah.
Like when you have those people who ground you, right? Because I think sometimes, especially with social media, in the writing world in general, you kind of start to get pulled in and you start to think this is its own whole world and that's all there is. And the truth of the matter is, most people don't even know about what you're writing, where you're submitting to in these magazines and whatnot. So creating that, I think that little kick of reality helps too with the rejections.
Yeah, I think also this is one of the reasons why I always keep saying I would never, this is just me, I don't think I could ever right now just write, by some miracle I was able to just write full time. I just don't think I would want that right now. I think I would still want to work in the creative field that I'm in to balance it out, because they're so opposite in a lot of ways that I also don't have to be like, oh my God, this book has to do so well for me to be like living.
Well, statistically too, it's very hard to get
exactly.
To that point.
Well, statistically, to actually write full time and make a living out of it. I mean, that's the thing. And I know for me,
live in New York.
Right. I mean, I've been spinning my wheels for how many years or how many jobs, and like I'm a teacher, and like now I'm back in school for my master's. I'm like, I would love to write full time, but I know that's probably not going to be something that's full time. But I'm not going to stop doing it. I was going to throw and when you guys were saying earlier too, as far as outlets go, and as far as other things you do that you can work on, and like music and stuff like that, like. I know this is going to sound stupid, but I play golf, and this is the best golf I've ever played at age 42. My handicap is lower than it's ever been, and I am having a blast, and I'm spinning my wheels over that and thinking about it all the time. And then when I get done my writing, I'm like, oh shit, I gotta do this, because I'm never going to be a pro golfer. Shit, I'm so far from that. It's not even funny, right? Especially at 42, but I love the sport. But that's part of the outlet. That's part of the other things that we do. So when we sit down to write, those stories can be there, and we've worked through the other stuff. You know what I mean? So let's wrap this up. What you got, Nick?
Yo, I don't know about you guys. I'm gonna be a full-time writer. I'm gonna make a living out of this. I'm gonna do this shit. I don't care how long it takes.
This, buddy.
Hey, I have full faith in you. Just know the average, you got to get about 10 books out there. Then that's about the point where you could start looking at full time.
I hope you do it. I do
too.
I live in one of the most expensive cities in the world, so I feel like I would need to make ridiculous amounts of money for me to even live, because making six figures in New York literally means you're like maybe middle class.
Making it. Barely.
Yeah, like you're
Yeah, I hear
you're just maybe not living paycheck to paycheck when you're making a little over 100,000. You're
Right.
just a little bit comfortable. Then the pandemic happens.
And then a couple
Yeah.
of us live in California, and then there's that too. So
Yeah, because San Diego and where you're at, Marshall's so expensive.
yeah, I might as well be living in San Francisco, even though thankfully I
Yeah.
don't. Because
So what I'm hearing is move out to the middle of the sticks and write, because
No.
you'll save money.
no, I don't want to live in Utah.
No,
Okay,
I
so-
can't live
Oh,
in
I
Utah.
said middle of the sticks here. We're
I don't wanna live
we're
in
a
the
little
middle of
cultured.
anywhere. Okay.
No.
Suddenly someone's going to come at me with an axe. I'm going to be running. It's going to be like the Ghostface Killer and Scream. I don't want that.
And you know
All
what?
right.
There's your book.
You guys are crazy.
I already
All right,
wrote
so to
that.
wrap this up,
It's called Conversations with Dead People.
let's do this. Let's say thank you to our one of our newest Patreon subscribers for this question. It obviously sparked an amazing conversation. Obviously our motto here is just keep writing. So please just keep doing that in whatever way, shape, or form it happens. Collect those rejections, celebrate them. I don't know. All the advice we gave out tonight, I think is all worth taking away. So here we are. Just keep writing or something.
Yeah.
And this has been Just Keep Writing, a podcast for writers, by writers, to keep you writing. You can find us at justkeepwriting.org. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Feel free to reach out to any of us on our social medias, and please jump in our Just Keep Writing Discord channel. Links to all of that is in the show notes. Lastly, please support our show by going to patreon.com/justkeepwriting. We offer daily writing prompts, early access to podcast episodes, and much more. Thanks for listening, and just keep writing.